We all know why that is. And welcome to those of you in Zoom land. I see a good sized crowd on Zoom too. So this is wonderful. We're really happy to have you. Do we have any new members in the room? Any new members? Oh, wow. Well, welcome. You guys want to say your names real fast?
Catherine Wilkins.
Catherine. Oh, good. Catherine and Chris. I recognize the name.
Matthew, I hope.
Matthew. Okay, recognize that name too.
I was here last week, but Alyssa.
Yes, I recognize all of that. How about in Zoom? Anybody new on Zoom? No? I can't see all your faces, so you'd have to call out.
Paula's on there.
Paula? Oh my gosh, Paula. Paula from far away. All right, everybody, we have a great program here tonight. And following the presentation, we will do some brief announcements and then our door prize. And I am going to jump right into it and have Patty. Oh, let me also say thanks to Babs for bringing refreshments. Babs, thank you for bringing refreshments. And I'll let Patty go ahead and introduce Dan. Okay, thanks.
Well, as Nancy said, we have a great crowd tonight. Thank you all for coming, and we know why. So Dan Cristol is the Chancellor Professor of Biology at the College of William and Mary, where he's taught for 30 years now, 30 years. His academic pursuits are motivated by his lifelong fascination with birds. He studies their behavior and ecology, and is best known for his work on migration, cognition, and the effects of pollution, which we've heard a lot from him in the past. He has published 100 papers with over 50 undergraduate co-authors. His teaching career has been demanding with large enrollments, diverse subject matter, and numerous hands-on lab sections, yet his student evaluations have been excellent and his courses continue to be popular, despite a reputation for difficulty. Cristol's research lab has attracted 5 to 10 independent research students each semester, including some of the best of William and Mary, such as winners of Rhodes, NSF predoctoral, and Goldwater scholarships. A number of his former students are now tenured biology professors at major research universities. The bursting energy and infectious enthusiasm that have made Dan successful in the classroom have spilled over into service. He has directed the university's most elite merit scholarship program for 19 years now, I think, and counting, and has written over 300 articles on birds for the Virginia Gazette. Dan holds a PhD in biology from the Indiana University, Bloomington, was undergraduate at Cornell University, and did postdoctoral fellowship at the University of Oxford in the UK, and the University of California at Davis. And tonight, he's adding a book to his many accomplishments. So please welcome Dan.
Just to be clear, I wrote that introduction, so.
Speak for a minute.
Yeah, I'll speak. So I'm here tonight to tell you about what I've been up to for the last year. I was on what we call research leave, which most people call sabbatical. And so I was writing a book, and I also did my normal research, but sabbatical, research leave, you don't teach and you can go away and you're not on any committees. So I had time to write a book that I started 7 years ago. I was on vacation with my in-laws in Florida, and they were playing pinochle, which is beyond me mentally. I just can't do it. I can play cards. I started with fish, with the little kids, and then they started to beat me at that. I upped my game all the way to euchre, I think, and then I just could not get to pinochle. So I was lying on the couch, and their pinochle games go on for 6-8 hours. And so I decided I would just write down, just start writing a book about birds and see how it went. So I did that. And then those first 7 pages are in the book still, although they're all divided up and moved around. But 7 years went by, and I intended to get back to it that whole time. But it took me till that sabbatical, which you get every 7th year, to get back to it. So I went up to Maine, and I stayed in a cabin until it got just unbearably cold. And I just wrote for like 10 hours a day in front of the wood stove. I know that when you hear authors talking, they say they, can do like 2 hours in the morning, but they're doing fiction. And they're like bearing their souls into this thing and, creating worlds. And I was just writing about birds, so I could do it for 10 hours a day. And so I wrote the whole book. It's pretty long. It's probably like 300 or 400 pages long in book form. And then I came back, kept working on it a little bit. Then I had a retreat where I invited 8 other professors to go to another cabin with me, and they all read the book and we talked about it. That was in the spring. That was in the summer, and they gave me a lot of comments and really, it's kind of devastating. But they tore the whole thing apart, and everyone had a different idea for how to make it better. So I spent the rest of the summer and working on kind of incorporating the comments that I liked and the changes that I liked. And I'm pretty close to being done now. And then I'm going to send it to a publisher and, see if I can get it published. So that's the idea. So what I was going to do tonight was to tell you a little about the structure of the book for just a minute, and then just read you 8 passages from the book. Each one is, the first 2 are like a whole page. The others are shorter. So don't get too worried. The first ones are longer. And I'll just tell you sort of what's going on, and I'll read you that part. And then I'm going to stop, and you can ask questions or give me comments, anything you think of about that little part, and then we'll go on to the next one. That's my plan anyway. Can someone on Zoom who has their camera on wave their hand if they can hear me and see me right now? Great, okay, thank you. So now we need the Zoom meeting. We need the share screen. Thank you. So first I came up with the title. I don't know why, but that's kind of the way I work. So a life bird is a bird that you see for the first time. It goes on your life list, it's a lifer. And to me, I just thought that was a good title to kind of give me a lot of latitude on what to write about. My idea was that, I've taught ornithology for 30 years, and I lead a lot of groups of students mostly, but people out to see birds, and I'm always explaining things, and people have told me that I had a good way of explaining things. So I thought, I'll just write a book where I just explain everything about birds. And, I won't write about the things that are in all the other books that everybody writes where they explain everything about birds. I'll just put my own personal spin on it. Sort of the things maybe that I would say in class when I was trying to explain one little thing about birds, like how they fly or something. I'll just explain that really well, and then I'll go on to the next thing. So then I also thought I'm going to talk about bird watching too, because I do a lot of that, and it's really important to me, and it's what got me into birds. So I'll also explain a lot about bird watching and like what that's all about. And then I thought, well, I really want to talk about bird research, not just about birds and bird watching, but bird research, because that's what I actually have spent the majority of my life doing. 40 years plus. I did it even before I was in, I did it in high school. I did a little bit of research. So to do that, it just sort of incorporated my whole life. So it started becoming a kind of a memoir, which was not what I intended. I was just going to write like a fun textbook kind of. So I'm calling it a memoir of birds, bird research, and birding. And so it is structured like this. And I hope you can see that. I'm not going to have anything else written for the whole rest of the talk, but this is just the table of contents of the book. And so it starts out with a little prologue, which I'm going to read you tonight, and then a chapter called Spark Bird, in which I talk about the first bird I really remember seeing, which was when I was 4 years old. And that sparked this whole thing. And so I'm going to read you like the first page of that chapter too. And then that's what I wrote when I was in Florida 7 years ago. I thought I'd start at the beginning. And then you can see it alternates between short chapters that are like something you might read in a textbook or you hear in one of my lectures that are about one thing. And they're only a page or 2 pages probably in book form long. So the first one's on dinosaurs are not extinct, they're birds. Okay, then it goes back to a long chapter, the Ross's gull. That is a really important bird in my youth because I didn't see it and I've never seen one. And Roger Torrey Peterson hadn't seen one and then he saw one and I didn't see it. So, you know, I'm still trying to see a Ross's gull. So that's kind of like when I was in middle school. And then there's one about birds growing up fast. That's about how little eggs turn into birds in 2 weeks, 4 weeks, including time in the egg. And it's just kind of amazing. And that's like something I would do in lecture. And then it goes to the affiliated woodpecker. That's about me in school and seeing the affiliated woodpeckers coming back into the city of Philadelphia. And then it goes to a little short chapter and then a long chapter about me and a short chapter about, they're all about birds, but if it's about me and birds. And then it's chronological. And then there's all these little, so you could read the short chapters and you'd have a 17 chapter book about what I think is the most exciting thing about birds. Or you could read the long chapters and you'd have kind of my autobiography, but only the parts about birds. I put nothing in there that doesn't relate to birds. Because a lot of things did happen in my life, like getting married and having kids and all that. It didn't really relate to birds, so it's not in the book. So that's how the book's set up. So I'm going to read you the prologue, the first page of the first chapter. Then I'm going to read you just a little bit of the 2 of the short sort of textbooky chapters, and then I'll read you some of the excerpts from some of the longer chapters. Okay, and I'll stop between each one. Does anyone have any questions right now before I start?
Are you gonna read White Meat?
I am going to read White Meat.
That's the strangest chapter name for birds.
I can't because it's a screenshot. You have to buy the book when it comes out in 3 or 4 or 5 years. Okay, so the first chapter, I tried to use pictures of mine or one student of mine who had given me a lot of good pictures. That's what this is. But I didn't have pictures of every bird. So the first chapter, the first little thing I'm going to read is about a blue-footed booby. So these are actually Nazca boobies. That's a blue-footed booby from my picture on the wall of my house. But it turns out the Nazca booby is actually the last life bird I've seen. So I saw one last year for the first time. I flew out to San Diego and took a boat for 2 days offshore and saw one booby. So it's a program. So this little first part, can anyone here not hear me, by the way? Is it too loud? All right. So I'm going to read you the prologue, and you'll get an idea of what this book is like, probably. And remember, it is all about birds, but sometimes it takes me a long time to get to the birds. Okay? So, the best pizza in Virginia can be obtained in a small town west of Charlottesville, not far from the mercury-contaminated headwaters of the polluted Shenandoah River. Now, everybody knows I talk about that all the time. Frosé Pizza was such a hit with my family that we timed all of our westward road trips to be nearby at lunch or dinner. On my way back from a few days of research in the Shenandoah Valley, I would usually pick up a cheese-laden pie and deliver it to my kids 3 hours later, cold and congealed, but still, according to them, better than any local pizza served fresh and hot. On one trip past Crozet, we stopped for lunch, and I sat my back to the wall in the newly renovated and expanded dining room at the corner booth. My daughters, in their early 20s, the book's not totally chronological, so, my daughters in their early 20s were sitting across from me when 3 older middle-aged couples walked in and seated themselves at a round table to my right. The women all had curiously blonde hair of a variety that does not occur in nature. The men had enormous beards. Bandanas, tattoos, and weathered black leather completed the look. Judging them to be motorcycle enthusiasts, I leaned over to my wife and whispered, hey, do you think they all came in the same minivan? Which I thought was a mildly amusing observation about how stereotypically biker this group seemed to be. My wife smiled as I had intended. My older daughter, Indigo, just stared at me, indicting with her eyes. The younger one, Lajulai, still hopeful that I could be made a better person, hissed, "You're so judgmental, Dad." She continued in this vein for long enough. After sputtering about it being just a joke and not meaning anything, I had to apologize to get her to stop excoriating me, rightfully, for making snap identifications of people, pigeonholing them into categories, and judging them based on societal stereotypes. Despite having arrived after us, the bikers got their pizza first, causing me to start paying attention to them again because I was very hungry. The man with his back facing me was passing his phone around the table clockwise. Each of his companions stared at the picture and muttered something positive about the image they were taking in. "Oh, cool. Nice. Where was that? Wow, neat." Despite the apology for being judgmental still warm on my tongue, I was inwardly unrepentant and imagined that the photo on the phone depicted some new paraphernalia for making a muffler louder, or maybe a device that protects the face from high-speed collisions with insects. My daughters were exactly right. I identify people by their field marks, just the way Roger Tory Peterson's Field Guide to the Birds taught me to do when I was 4 years old. I love people watching, but it's not purely observational as with my bird watching. My field guide to human life includes stories that explain relationships between people, the reasons for their grimace, the cause of their slight limp, and where they're headed in life. Much to Indigo and Lajulai's annoyance, I'm always an ecologist, hypothesizing about causes and effects, whether observing people or birds. The phone made it all the way around the table, and I leaned in to hear what the owner had to say, hoping to confirm my assumption about the photograph. "Blue-footed booby," he said, "a new bird for me." I was so wrong. These motorcyclists, dressed so differently than me, enjoyed the same hobby. I too had taken a trip years earlier to see blue-footed boobies in a rental car with my dad rather than on a Harley, all the way to the Salton Sea, a slowly dying salt lake in Southern California. Birds are incredible and they're everywhere. Most of my life has been spent watching them, studying them, surveying them, and thinking about them. This book is about birds and their profound impact on my life. As a child, I pursued birds, attracted them to my backyard, counted their flocks. Later, I made major life decisions with birds in mind, named my children after them, and studied their ecology as my profession. Now I want to share the story of what I have observed. So that is the prologue. The book ends with something about with a chapter called Blue-footed Boobies, and it explains that trip to go see them. But I thought I'd put that part first. We'll see, to kind of explain what the book was about. So do we have any questions or comments on that part before I read the first page of the first chapter? Yes, behind and then front.
Based on that, I want to read the book.
All right, good. That's what I want to hear. Kathy.
What did you name your children that were bird names?
Indigo, like indigo bunting, and Lajulai, like Lajulai bunting. Yeah, my wife loved the name Indigo, and that has a lot of other meanings. There's indigo snake, there's the indigo dye from the indigo plant, but Lajulai was a harder sell. So, but we were from California before this, and there's Lajulai buntings. There were Lajulai buntings in the yard, and they're quite a fantastic bird. So. But if you want people to remember your kids at the playground when they're little, give them those names. Everybody remembers them. All right. Yes. Oh, great.
Every strike of a conversation with those people at Rosette Pizza.
That's a great question. I wish the answer was yes, but it was no. And I didn't tell my family what was on the photograph until we left. So humiliated. All right. Any other questions thank you. I'd love questions from the online crowd as well. All right. So the next one is called Sparkbird. I put a date by each chapter, which is when at least part of the chapter happened. So this is 1967. And here it goes. This is how I got into birding. How I incited Scott and Nathan to commit arson has never been clear to me. I don't remember exactly why I went upstairs to the gymnasium with a book of matches that I had brought in from home. Normally, I would have been happy staying in the classroom, climbing up onto the little wooden step stool and taking down a hammer or a screwdriver just to gaze up and marvel at its carefully drawn outline on the pegboard. I don't know if anyone else remembers that, but they'd draw the tools on the pegboard. So when you took it down, yeah, I love that. But this day, I convinced my friends to ignite a matchbook that I had brought in, tossing it into the thick bunnies of dust under the clanging radiator in the corner of the basketball court. We were caught immediately and sentenced to a week of suspension from preschool. It was November 1967 in Philadelphia. Being under house arrest with my mother was boring, as punishment is meant to be. So I perched like a cat, staring out the kitchen window. Oh, I'm going to change. That's what this is about. My spark bird. Yeah, on bricks. That one's not doing too well. The one I saw was a little better shape. I perched like a cat, staring out the kitchen window at our one tree, a leafless mimosa. To the right was a tattered wooden fence leaning into our small stand of bamboo, my only protection against Ricky, the neighbor's perpetually angry German shepherd. To the left was the crumbling stucco wall of the Harada's dry cleaning store, with the attached remains of a wooden awning structure that had been chewed into Swiss cheese by busy carpenter bees. Just behind the mimosa tree was the abrupt end of someone else's 3-story row house. What eventually caught my eye was an animal about the size and shape and color of a football that rested on the bricks covering our backyard. It sported intricately patterned brown and tan and gray feathers that would have camouflaged it perfectly among the fallen leaves strewn across a forest floor. But on our red bricks, it was easy to see. Birds were just one of many equally interesting parts of my world at 4 years old, along with toy trucks, Sunday morning pancakes made in the shape of a smiley face, and the mysterious Vietnam War that my parents were so agitated about. My mother, a restless homemaker who had not yet started her teaching career, knew this was something unusual and dialed my psychiatrist father's receptionist and left a message about a brown football-shaped bird with a long beak. He remotely identified it as an American woodcock based on her description, a process that seemed like magic to me at the time. It was still resting motionless on the bricks when the sun set. It had selected my backyard from the tens of thousands in the city to sleep off a migration hangover. There was much woodcock excitement around the dinner table that night as my father lamented missing it and asked that my mother and I retell every detail of the discovery. In the modern parlance of birdwatching, this was my spark bird, which is the bird sighting that converts someone from being a person who is just aware of birds to one who cares about them a lot. A spark bird can be an epiphany, like the Carolina chickadee that impressed my father so much that he decided to become a bird watcher on the spot. Or it can be a memory, the first brick in a long and inevitable journey to see them all. So I'll stop there. The chapter goes on and on and on and on and on. But that's how I got started. I remember that very clearly. I don't remember anything before that. And, it really changed my life. This is not the woodcock I saw, which would have been taken in black and white film at the time. This is just one that is exactly like the scene that I saw. This is one that actually has hit a window, it has hit a building and is just sitting on the sidewalk, but it sort of captures. So I got this off of the internet. Any questions about that? Yeah.
That guidance from your father.
Yes, and a lot of the book, the first third of the book is about all the trips I took with him and other people, and then how I sort of surpassed. He's stayed the same level of birdwatching skill his whole life, and I started out at 4 years old and got to be much better than he was, like when I was 11 or something, and then basically I dragged him around for the rest of his life, showing him new birds, and so there's a lot about that in the book, but I thought that that's what the book was going to be about, but actually it's just kind of the beginning and the end. And most of the book he's not really in because most of my life I was here, not really with my dad. So, but there's a lot of him in the book, and also all the other people who mentored me in different ways. And hopefully I gave them credit. But I also try to explain like why I like bird watching. And it's more about me being good at something when I really wasn't good at anything else. I was terrible at school. I was badly behaved. I was always in trouble. I, wasn't successful socially really for a long time, and maybe still. And So, then people noticed I was a good bird watcher. And when I was maybe 10 or something, and so then that just became my thing. And then, he introduced me to other people who could help me at higher levels than he could. Yeah,
Did
sure.
you get suspended anymore?
Pardon?
Did you get suspended from school? Any
I
other time?
made it through the rest of preschool. I was in a lot of trouble in first grade because the first word, I was a delayed reader. I couldn't read till 5. Till 5th grade, excuse me, till 5th grade. Yeah, not 5. 5's good. I couldn't read till 5th grade, but I had a few words. The first one was F-U-C-K. That first word I could ever spell, and I wrote it all over the table in first grade. So I got in trouble again. But second grade, we lived in England. I didn't get in trouble because I explained this in the book, actually. Like, my mother told them not to disrupt my American education, so they just put me in the corner for the whole year. I had a great time. And then third grade, I came back, went to a new school, and that's when I still couldn't read, and I was really in bad shape for like a year or two. But then they figured out, like, oh, send him to the science teacher who happened to catch birds and was a friend of Roger Tory Peterson. So it was just, from there it was easy. Yeah. Okay, so that's that chapter. Did I miss any questions? Anything online? No. Yeah.
Have you ever met anyone who has a cooler spark group than that?
No. Not the setting. I mean, it was on bricks in the city. If you go out to see one at a breeding grounds, that's cheating.
Anybody younger than 4 or younger who has a spark group?
I'm just very lucky. My job is to teach students, and I mentor a lot of students because I run the scholarship program. And, a lot of what I do is to try to get them to figure out what their passion is. And they're 20, 22, and they just have no idea. And I just feel so lucky. I never struggled with that at all. It was just so obvious for me. And I talk about that in the book too. So now I'm going to read you just, yeah.
When you get a question, I think you should repeat it.
A great idea. I'm sorry I didn't do that. Yeah, I will do that from now on. Excellent idea. I'm going to read you 2 parts of 2 of the sort of more bird biology short chapters, which I intentionally kept very short so that right when you think, oh, I'm learning a lot, this is kind of boring, it just goes back to me getting, kicked out of school again or whatever. So this one's called Dinosaurs Are Not Extinct. And if you are a reader of the Virginia Gazette, you'll know that this was an article, a form of this, because I had to write 17 of these. And I thought, oh, these are actually really good art. These would be just great articles. So I just keep sending them in as articles. So a few of them have been, this is one of them, but it's not exactly the same as what was in the paper because this is much longer. So it's called Dinosaurs Are Not Extinct. And I hope that everyone here knows that birds are descended from dinosaurs, but they're actually descended from dinosaurs in such a way that they are dinosaurs. They're not that different. They are dinosaurs. We just call them something different. And I try to explain that here. I'll just read you the first part. Before, it was humid and lush and warm and sunny, with huge ferns and a profusion of flowers bordering shallow seas full of fish. Then, with no warning, at one specific moment in time, 66 million years ago, an asteroid several miles wide hit Mexico. It set off wildfires, tsunamis, and massive clouds of acid and dust that darkened the sky. A decade of winter killed much of the Earth's plant life and triggered a chain of ecological catastrophes that led to the rapid extinction of most of the dinosaurs and 75% of all life. But some life survived, including mammals that may have taken refuge in burrows and scavenged. There were also small, feathered, hollow-boned dinosaur species that somehow persisted through the darkness and dust and cold. Their descendants are still with us today, around 10,000 species of small, feathered, hollow-boned animals that we call birds. The category of reptiles contains birds. Lizards, snakes, crocodiles, and turtles are commonly classified as reptiles because they all share a common ancestor, some scaly, cold-blooded creature that evolved almost 300 million years ago. From that ancestor, the turtles split off very early, soon after the mammals. Mammals evolved from an early reptile long before there were dinosaurs. If turtles and dinosaurs are reptiles, then birds are also, because they have the same reptile ancestor in common. Eventually, dinosaurs evolved and dominated Earth for almost 200 million years. Some dinosaurs in the group called theropods, which contained the fearsome Tyrannosaurus rex, had fuzzy little feathers. Theropods included small, flighted, bird-like dinosaurs with proper feathers, and they survived the crash of 66 million years ago. We know all this from fossil evidence. First, there was the discovery of Archaeopteryx, which is a pigeon-sized dinosaur with many bird-like characteristics, including very modern-looking wing feathers and a wishbone, but also a long, heavy tailbone, a mouthful of teeth, and clawed hands like a dinosaur. Archaeopteryx lived 150 million years ago, but there were other bird-like dinosaurs even before that. The discovery of Archaeopteryx in 1860 was a sensation, coming as it did just a year after the publication of Darwin's incredibly controversial book, Origin of the Species by Means of Natural Selection. I'll stop there, but when I go on and explain how Archaeopteryx kind of misled us, because it's not the ancestor, it's not the ancestor of birds. It's just like an early type of bird-like dinosaur, but the ancestor of birds came from something else. And so for like 100 years, we didn't realize that birds came from dinosaurs because it just didn't all make sense. But now it does because we found lots more fossils. So I didn't take this picture. It's one of the few that I got off the internet. But they have no idea what Archaeopteryx really looked like, of course. So how about questions? And I will repeat them for the Zoom crowd if there are any questions about that section. And then next I'll read another like bird biology chapter called White Meat. Any questions on that one? Yes.
So much like the cormorant that I just saw.
Yes. It's only pigeon sized. Cormorant is relatively early, but the earliest birds are all gone. Oh, the question was, is a cormorant one of the early species of birds? So the earliest species of birds are all long gone, but of the modern living birds, cormorants are fairly early. Yes. Cormorants and shags, yes. This bird looks like a cormorant because the person drawing it was trying to make it look like a bird. So they figured, well, let's make it look like a cormorant, but we don't really know what color it was. We can learn the colors of feathers in fossils to some extent. They can look for the pigment molecules, the very powerful microscope, and deduce something about whether it was blue or pigmented, and if it was pigmented, what kind of pigments. But all right, so now we'll do white meat. All right, so in white meat, I first talk about how birds are a combination of being lightweight and very powerful, which is sort of the first lesson in every ornithology class. But then I specifically go into why there's light meat and dark meat. And I'll read the white meat section. There's a dark meat part too. It doesn't get its own chapter. Okay, most of that power production for flight occurs in the breast muscles. The mass of meat, pectoralis muscle for the powerful downstroke on top of the supracoracoideus muscle for the upstroke, is the subject of much attention. Sorry, the mass of meat, pectoralis, is the subject of much attention at Thanksgiving. Domestic turkeys have been bred to have disproportionately large breast muscles. So large, in fact, that their legs are not equipped to support them, and they spend much of their time lying down. But all birds, not just those selectively bred for our table, have outsized breast muscles. In birds, the flight muscles may comprise as much as 25% of their weight, whereas in humans, the comparable pectoralis muscles are closer to 1% of our weight. Not only are turkey breasts large, but the flesh is white. This light-colored muscle is the result of fast twitch muscle fibers that can contract rapidly to lift the massive turkey off the ground and get it up into the safety of a tree in emergencies. These fast twitch fibers have less myoglobin, that cousin of hemoglobin that lives in the muscles, because they don't need to carry as much oxygen into these specialized anaerobic performing white meat cells. Anaerobic means without oxygen. The lack of myoglobin makes the meat whiter and easily dried during cooking. That's why I spatchcock my turkey. 6 hours in oven will ruin the breast meat of a turkey. The muscle fibers in white meat can metabolize carbohydrate fuel using a process that does not require oxygen. And this can happen much faster without the need for immediate heavy breathing. Then I go on to talk and a little bit boringly about, whether you use oxygen in your muscles or don't, and why people mostly eat birds with white meat, because the dark meat with the myoglobin is gamey, because you're tasting all that iron from the myoglobin, but that iron is what carries the oxygen into the dark meat muscles. So if you shoot a duck and eat it, it's all dark meat. If you were to eat a sparrow, it's all dark meat. White meat, which is what we think of as bird muscle, is very rare. Only a few kinds of birds have it in their breast muscle because they don't fly, essentially, except in emergencies. And in an emergency, you can't breathe fast enough to get the oxygen, before the tiger jumps on the peacock anyway. So they just have to take off without any oxygen, and that kind of muscle can do that. But you pay a price, because that kind of metabolism, it produces lactic acid, which is very painful. Like when you work out for the first time in 2 years or something like I usually do, then you're in a lot of pain, because the price for metabolizing energy without oxygen is that you produce lactic acid, which is, will eventually knock you out. So that's what I explained in that chapter, in a page and a half or something like that. But I want to read you lots of little parts. So that's all I'm going to read from the short avian biology chapters, but there are 17 of those between the longer chapters. And I might rearrange them, but they're sort of in order of maybe how they relate to the long chapter, the ones that relate the most to the long chapter, like I'm growing up and the birds are growing up, things like that. Okay. Any questions? Great. Okay. Oh, there's my white meat. I'm one picture behind. Sorry. So this is a picture of a turkey from this summer up at Brigantine in New Jersey, where I do my research. This is kind of cool. This is the same turkey, 30 seconds apart. What do you think happened between the picture on your left and the picture on your right? Yeah, female walked up. And what you can see is that if you look at the picture on the left, there's this tiny little thing sticking up from the top of its head, and it's white. That's called snoot. And turkey hunters call it a snoot. Snoot, S-N-O-O-T. Okay, now 30 seconds later, look at what the snoot is doing. It's inflated, it's erected basically, filled with blood, turned red, and is hanging an inch past the beak. That happened in 30 seconds. Also, the color of the neck. Look at the change in the color of the neck. I can't enlarge it, but it's blue and red on the right. It's kind of gray and a little bit pink on the left. Same turkey, 30 seconds apart. Also, of course, he's erected all his feathers. So he looks like the house finch at Nancy's feeder. But, he stayed like this for half an hour until the female just lost interest and walked away. She never was that interested. It was pouring rain. You can't tell from the picture. But all right, so that went with the white meat chapter. But that's an example of a kind of chapter, a kind of topic I would pick. I think everyone is familiar with it, but they haven't really thought about it too much, and they don't realize that most birds don't have any white meat and why it's white, and it does dry out. That's why, you should have the leg and not the breast at Thanksgiving if you have a choice, because it's so much moisture, because it's retained all that myoglobin and fat. And yes, Mac.
Do wild turkeys have white meat also?
Yes. So the question is, do wild turkeys also have white meat? Yes, they don't have as much of it, but wild turkeys also only fly when they have to, which they climb a tree at night and roost on top of a tree, and then they glide down to the ground in the morning. And if they're never attacked by a predator suddenly, they don't ever fly. They run away. Their legs are dark meat because they just run and walk all day, but their breast is white meat. And that's why they were, bred to be, they and chickens were bred to be the things that we eat all the time. And and we do eat ducks, but it's kind of a whole process, you gotta really like it.
One of the birds, I assume large birds, raptors with powerful flight muscles, have white meat or?
No, they should not have white meat. Anything that flies regularly will not have white meat. So the raptors are flying all the time. They have to fly fast and slow. And so they're going to have dark meat that they can just breathe and replenish with oxygen, continuously, and never If they flap fast, they might do a little bit of anaerobic respiration to just get out of there fast, but they don't even take off fast. That's why the eagles take off when you're like 300 yards away, because it takes them a long time to get in the air. Yes,
So are flightless birds heavy in white meat?
I don't know the answer to that. I would guess that they have whatever their ancestors who were flighted had, and it doesn't probably change that rapidly. So there's flightless cormorants. The big ostriches. Yeah. They probably don't ever fly. Yeah, since they're flightless, they don't ever fly. So they would probably not have white meat because they don't need to have bursts of flighted. So they probably also have only dark meat, but I don't know for sure. People do eat ostrich. We could probably look it up. They shouldn't. If my reasoning is right, they don't have white meat. Okay. Oh, sorry. That question I didn't repeat was what kinds of birds have white meat? Do flightless birds have white meat? All right. The next chapter that I'm going to read you is a short section from a long chapter about my bird feeders, all through life, really, but starting as a kid. And so I grew up in the city, and we did have birds in our yard, but not very many because there weren't any woods around. But there was this one winter that was quite memorable for me. And, I still feed birds. I just moved to a new house and I have put up like 17 feeders right by the window because at my old house, they were kind of far away, but it's so great. I'm just getting started. So this chapter, I talk about coming home. It's called White-winged Crossbill, the chapter. And I have a picture of a white-winged crossbill, not the white-winged crossbill in the chapter. There was once a white-winged crossbill at my feeder. My dad didn't bother to wake me up to show it to me. So that's how the chapter starts. But then I talk more about bird watching, why people bird watch, why I bird watch. Bird feed, why I feed birds, and some of the experiences with cool birds that have come to my feeders. So this one is, I talk about how most of the time birds don't really need your feeders. It's really just for your entertainment, but there are a few days every winter when you actually are saving their lives probably. And we had such a winter storm in Philadelphia in 1978. I would have been in high school, with what seemed like 4 feet of snow topped by a thick crust of hard ice. The trellis from which I had hung the droll Yankee Niger feeder, which we called Thistle back then, of course, was covered in patiently waiting rows of common redpolls and pine siskins and American goldfinches. Only 6 of their hordes could feed at one time on my feeder, so they just waited their turns like rush hour commuters at a subway turnstile. The storm had hit even worse farther north, where those birds normally would reside. Those redpolls with their tiny red cap and throat and finely streaked brown and white bodies were the only life bird I have ever seen at one of my own feeders. And they stayed for many, many weeks once they had discovered my Niger offerings. Large flocks of juncos and sparrows, even some American tree sparrows usually found in the countryside and much farther north, squabbled for the millet and sunflower seeds that we heaved with buckets on top of the unshovelable snow. Our few Carolina wrens and red-bellied woodpeckers, both fragile southern birds that had recently extended their ranges as far north as Pennsylvania, perished. But I'm convinced that in February 1978, the Cristols prevented large numbers of birds from dying. I was hooked for life by that winter of redpolls. Though I've been feeding birds ever since, I've never had another common redpoll at one of my own feeders. So it was a bit of a bait and switch. So then I talk about how many people feed birds, and it's more than watch the Super Bowl, things like that. And then I talk about different interesting birds that have come to my feeder, like the orange-crowned warbler and the western tanager and things like that, which just were special moments in my life, really, and prolonged things, and how I make my kids look at the birds and that sort of thing. So, but I've never seen another life bird at one of my own feeders since 1978. Although I've gone to other people's feeders to see them, of course. So that's that. Any questions about that short excerpt from the White-winged Crossbill chapter? Okay. Yeah.
I'm sort of, anywhere in the book, you talk about how
the influence of bird watching on your family? Kids, wife, immediate family.
That's a good question. I decided to leave them out of the book entirely because I just didn't want them to have to deal with like lots of people reading about them. I worked my kids in, I had to put my kids in a few places, but I kept my wife out of it entirely, except for eventually I had to sort of explain how annoyed she was when I kept running off to see things and, but I pretty much don't talk about my own family in the book, except as just characters in a scene that's about birds. And truthfully, most of my dealings with my family don't have to do with birds. So I wasn't keeping things out that were important, but I just made that decision. And so far I've stuck with it. And some people have said the book rings hollow because you're just like missing the thing that you spent the most time doing in the last 35 years, which is taking care of your family or interacting with your family. But they're in there. It mentions that I got married. It mentions that my wife is present for this or present for that, but I don't talk about their feelings about anything. So that's a good question. The question was, do I mention my family in the book and with the impact? You can deduce the impact on my family from some of the things I say. Yeah.
I've always been interested in why or how many people prefer white meat to dark meat. When you go to a restaurant, if there's chicken on the menu, it's always chicken breasts. And I'm frankly puzzled by that.
Yeah. The question is, why do people prefer white meat? Referring back to the previous reading. And the answer is, it's like people don't want to really know that they're eating an animal. So people really don't like to eat things that someone's shot, right? And they don't like to eat other species than we normally eat because they have flavors that sort of taste gamey, which means it's more like a wild animal. And even dark meat tastes gamier than light meat. So light meat is like lunch meat. It's like comparing lunch meat to a ham or something. Like it just doesn't have much flavor. It's very generic. And most people don't want to know that their food was once running around and someone had to kill it. I believe that's the answer. And dark meat reminds them of that. Yeah. Great. Thank you for that question. I didn't put that in the book, but I should have. I tried really hard in this book not to criticize people, never to say anything bad about students, especially. And they're in the book, but if I tell a funny story about students, it's got to be funny because I did something stupid, not because they did. And I still, in that retreat, a lot of people said that I came across as psychoanalyzing people and superior to them, putting them down somehow. So I've tried to really get some of that out of there. But of course, when I wrote the book, I just wrote a lot more than was what's in here. And, I wrote what really happened. And sometimes other people do things that are worthy of criticism, but I've tried to really tone it down so I don't sound like a jerk, basically, in my one book that I'm ever going to write. So, okay, so the next one is the chapter is called Herring Gull, and these are just two fun pictures of herring gulls from recently. The one on the left is a first-year bird. That's why it's all brown, and it's eating a puffer fish that's alive and puffed up. That's why they're called puffer fish, because they do that to keep birds from swallowing them, which the bird cannot do unless the fish dies and he deflates. So he had a hard time. He was walking around the boardwalk, and this guy had an incredibly hard time with this American eel, which he never actually was able to swallow. We watched him for a long time. It's not a great picture, but that's an adult herring gull with an American eel that is already about 8 inches down his throat, and there's another like 8 inches in the water. This thing was never going to be able to get that. I'm sure that a great black-backed gull could eat that eel, but not the herring gull. Great black-backed gulls, can eat puffins in midair. So, yeah, they can catch a puffin in midair and swallow it. I've seen the footage, and they can handle these too. But anyway, these are eyes bigger than their stomachs. But this chapter is about herring gull. It's about my research on herring gulls. So each chapter, I didn't really mention this, each chapter is named after a bird that plays a key role in the chapter. But the whole chapter is not necessarily about that bird. and didn't necessarily all occur during the same year. They often jump around. So the part I'm going to read you about herring gull is just a funny story that happened in my lab group of students while we were studying herring gulls, but it doesn't have anything to do with herring gulls. Okay. It's just, this is how the book is. So this is typical. There's nothing about herring gulls here. The whole chapter is about me studying herring gulls, but this part, I think, is a story for people from Williamsburg would appreciate. So my local whooper swan, I talk about how there's one whooper swan at Busch Gardens in a pond, and it's been here since I got here, basically, and almost. My local whooper swan has a job at the amusement park, which is to express its dominance and territoriality to keep Canada geese off of this particular pond. The park purchased this whooper swan in 1999 and put him to work right after the Fabio incident. The amusement park hired Fabio, a Greek model, who posed as the hunky protagonist. Oh, wait a second. There he is. As the hunky protagonist for the covers of over 1,000 romance novels. That's what he's actually known for. People say he's a supermodel, but he was a model for the covers of romance novels, like this one. They hired him to take the inaugural ride on Apollo's chariot, surrounded by women dressed in togas. Get it? Greek supermodel, Apollo, chariot, togas. But as the roller coaster went upside down at 80 miles an hour over the pond on its maiden voyage, a big flock of wild Canada geese was surprised into a chaotic takeoff. One of the geese smashed into the video camera mounted on the roller coaster near Fabio, destroying the equipment, killing itself, and knocking a piece of metal loose that grazed Fabio's famous nose. And then I have in parentheses, can a Greek person have a Roman nose? I'm gonna take that out. Fabio's nose bled a lot, all over the toga-clad women around him, but he received only a single stitch. Today, at 65 years old, he says that near-death experience with the goose made him live differently from then on, like each day might be his last. And he still feels bad about the goose and the fact that everyone thinks he killed the goose when it was actually the camera equipment that did the deed. This was pre-internet, so I didn't hear about the incident until the next day, April 1st, 1999, when two of my students, two of the best research students I've ever had, both long tenured biology professors now, decided to play a prank on me. One of them was volunteering in the local hospital the evening before and had heard about Fabio coming in. That's true. They told me about the goose incident and then made up a story that went something like this. My student had tended to Fabio, and when he asked her what she did, she told him about her research, she was with herring gulls, which involved observing gulls skillfully dropping clams onto roads to break them open. Fabio, in the prank story, had been really interested, and so she said she had invited him to meet me at our lab meeting the next day. And he said he would stop by while laying low to let his most valuable facial asset recover. A lab meeting is when all the students doing research with the professor come together weekly to update each other on their progress, learn new skills, and generally be held accountable. It's an important hour of the week in the research lab, and being halfway to tenure and in need of as much data as possible for grant proposals and publications, these meetings were no joke to me as a new professor. But at this one, I jumped up anxiously at least 15 times and ran out for a look every time I heard footsteps in the corridor. I don't know if they were all in on it or just Dana and Elise, but they didn't tell me it was an April Fool's prank until after the meeting was over. My ego is still smarting from being taken in so completely. But to be fair, it isn't every day you think you're going to meet a Greek supermodel with a stitched up nose. All of my life, I had been the instigator of April Fool's pranks. Not until that time was I the recipient. Once I'd made a key lime pie using construction sand from the road work outside of our house in place of the graham cracker crust. I gave my father a big piece, sprayed with whipped cream after dinner. He gulped and swallowed 2 bites before noticing. Because he was a veteran of so many of my pranks, from peeing into cellophane-covered toilets to cleaning up dog feces that my sister and I had made out of paper mache and hand-painted, he just said, "I'm not going to get mad at you because that was such a well-done prank." Later that night, I got my punishment anyway. as I listened to a brief argument, seemingly about nothing, through the closed door of my parents' bedroom. The spat concluded with my father saying to my mother very emphatically, "Well, you didn't just eat 2 mouthfuls of sand tonight." That's the end of that. But then I go back to explaining, a lot of the chapters are like this. I go back to explaining about the herring gull research, and then I have another, amusing anecdote about something that happened, and goes back and forth. So that the idea is you might be lured into reading all about how we generate information as scientists about herring gulls and how we know what we know, without feeling bored because you're kind of waiting to see what stupid thing I'm going to do next. So that's that one. And then the next one, very strange. Okay. So this is in a chapter called Great Catbird 2020. So it's like towards the end of the book. That each chapter is about 3 or 4 years after the last one. And again, not the whole chapter doesn't take place then. But so this is about my research, mostly on gray catbirds, my current and ongoing research on the pollution of various of America's great rivers and how mercury or dioxin or PCBs that have gotten into the river probably 50 years ago are still present, still getting into the birds, and how I started doing that research on the Shenandoah River. So there's 2 chapters on that, and then there's 1 chapter I switched to gray catbirds. They're really sensitive to PCBs, so it doesn't take very much PCB so that to get them to the level where their eggs won't hatch. And they're extremely common, and they're getting more common, unlike most birds, because they love disturbed edges and they love invasive plants. They love Japanese knotweed, which is one of the worst invasive plants in the country. And it spreads up and down rivers where there's industrial work and people bulldozing and disturbing the soil. The knotweed gets in, it puts up 15 to 20 foot stems, and it puts roots down that deep as well. And it's impossible to eradicate. There's places in the world where if you have it in your yard, you can't sell your house because you'll never be able to get rid of it. And it just makes a jungle. So it takes over parks, and people are just really struggling with it in the Northeast, but it's also in Virginia. It's on the Shenandoah River, and it just spreads up and down the banks of these industrialized rivers. So gray catbirds love nesting in that stuff, and they love coffee plantations and deforestation. So they're doing well in South America and Central America, and they're doing well here. So I've been studying for 5-6 years now along the Passaic River, which is badly polluted. The Passaic River is where they manufactured Agent Orange, which was used in the Vietnam War. It's a defoliant, so it's an herbicide just like Roundup. It's very similar to Roundup. However, if you manufacture it very rapidly without careful controls, there's a byproduct called dioxin, which is produced in there as just a very, very small amount. But dioxin is incredibly toxic to humans. So in the Vietnam War, on the American side, 50,000 soldiers were killed by bombs and bullets, right? Which doesn't even sound much compared to a lot of other wars. But 250,000 people died from exposure to dioxin, American soldiers, in the 20 or 30 years afterwards. Liver cancer primarily, things like that. And they were exposed to it, not by being sprayed with it. They were the ones spraying it. So they were just exposed to it as it leaked out of barrels in their camps and things like that. Imagine the Vietnam side, how many people died from it, because they're actually getting sprayed with it on purpose. Their forests and the soldiers in the forests. So that's a long intro, but there's a lot of dioxin in the Passaic River from this manufacturing, because when they'd find a batch that had too much dioxin, they'd just throw it in the river and make a new one if it's not heated at the right temperature. So, and as I said, gray catbirds are very sensitive to it. So we walk up and down the 17 miles of that river looking for catbird nests, and also barn swallow nests, and also the nest of anything else that nests there, but there aren't too many other birds. They're not like a lot of eagles and herons and things, because it's so industrialized, like most of the rivers I work on. So we have a group, but it's not efficient to go around in a group when you're looking for birds' nests. So each person has their own section of river, and you go and look for the nests, and then we sample the eggs. We take 2 of the eggs and we measure how much dioxin's in them. And we do lots of other things too, but that's one of the things we do. So I started seeing these dolls when I was walking up and down the river and just taking their picture because they're so striking, you know, it's just hard to look at it even. And I kept finding them. And as an ecologist, I kept thinking, what are these? Where do they come from? I know why they're still here because these are parts of no one else can get to these parts of the river. These are like behind all the factories, between the river and the factory. It's not a river that people fish and hike along. It's just this kind of no man's land between the factories and the river, and these dolls wash up. But where do they all come from? So in this chapter, I describe all the different dolls I found and you know, my speculation as to where they came from and how I sort of got more and more information until I actually, you know, I was always thinking like, whose doll was this? How can there be so many dolls in this river? And eventually, I'm not going to read you this part because it's long and makes me sound like a stalker sort of, but I found a doll, and through a series of events, I found a photo of the little girl whose doll it was too. And her name was on the back, along with the year. She was now 30 something. And so using Facebook, I got this person's entire life just because it was open. And I could look at every single thing she said and wrote since high school and what her life is like now and everything. And I was just, you know, I was already obsessed with dolls, and this just was sort of too much. So I stopped photographing the dolls. I stopped looking for dolls, and I did not contact the person to give her doll back because it seemed to be there under bad circumstances. But I actually, you know, eventually found one of the owners of these dolls. I still don't know why her doll was by the river, but so this chapter outlines all of that. And what I do is I talk about finding a doll and how weird that is, and I show a picture of the doll. And then I talk about how we do this research and how the Superfund law works, which is very complicated. But the reason we're doing this research is because the government can collect, if it decides to, can collect money from the polluters, no matter how long after it is, for any dead birds. And that's because you own the birds. The birds are property of the people of the United States. And so the government is their trustee for you. And if someone takes that bird from you, they owe you a new bird. And so if I can demonstrate how many catbirds they've killed, which isn't that easy because it goes back, then the company has to actually pay the government for that many catbirds, which is the interesting part is how you do that. So we don't know what a catbird's worth. But anyway, so that's why I do this research, because the Superfund law says that the companies have to, if you can come up with a credible lawsuit, that the company has to pay the people of the United States back in catbirds. So in theory, there could be, you know, these lawsuits could lead to billions of dollars going for bird habitat to create new catbirds in places where they aren't already, which would be like fields and things where they would plant trees. And you know, at the Shenandoah River, they already settled that case, and there was $50 million for bird habitat and other things. And another case I worked on the Penobscot River, it was $287 million. So, and some of these cases are much bigger, like the Hudson River, that could be $1 billion if it's ever settled. But who knows? But they can't settle it without all the data on exactly how badly the birds are affected. So that's what my research is. That's really boring. And if I just wrote a chapter about that, I thought it would be uninteresting to most people, not the people at the bird club, but just most people. I want to sell more than, 37 books. So this chapter, this little teeny excerpt I'm going to read you is about finding that doll. Okay. And it just gives you a feeling for, how I go back and forth. But that's the idea pretty much in the whole book, is going back and forth between things that I think are inherently a little on the pedantic, dull side, and things that are maybe more interesting to people who aren't already fascinated with this. While ecotoxicology fieldwork is always carried out in teams, the most efficient way to get the job done often involves splitting up and spending many hours alone each day doing a repetitive task, usually searching for or counting something. In my case, it's often gray catbirds because they are very abundant along industrialized rivers and very sensitive to pollutants. Sometimes when I had a lonely trek to make along the Passaic's destitute shoreline to get to the next small patch of vegetation that might host a catbird nest, I would make a conscious decision to look for lost dolls among the ever-shifting tidal debris. I never found one while searching and became convinced that for some reason they had to find me. I told you I became sort of obsessed with them. I thought about them way too much. The grinding repetition of fieldwork is depressing. The grinding repetition of fieldwork in depressing, abused landscapes often leads me to have weird thoughts of the supernatural, or to talk to myself out loud in a British accent, or to contemplate at great length why Liz Taylor got married so many times. So my next find revealed more complexity to the doll ecosystem. I was looking for great catbird nests in their favorite location, dense stands of Japanese knotweed at a riverside park. This remarkable invasive plant will quickly spread once it has gained a foothold in disturbed soil. Here, the knotweed, which eventually forms impenetrable monocultures 15 feet high with 20-foot deep roots, was threatening to overtake the tennis courts. A park employee had just finished mowing down a buffering swath around the courts with a special vehicle that scrapes away the top layer of soil while hacking at the stems. Totally useless. They just come right back. As I traversed the knotweed apocalypse, I happened to spot a dirt-filled mouth crying silently up at me. The knotweed terminator had scraped away just enough soil to reveal the face of another lost doll. This was the only doll that I ever touched before photographing, as her beautiful blue eyes had been filled with dirt. I realized that, like contaminants or nutrients in a food web, dolls can move around and might emerge on the shores of a river many years after the child abandoned her. They might even escape previous burial in a landfill, riding floodwaters and erosion to arrive at some better patch, perhaps with a waterfront view. This doll had emerged from burial and might soon be on the move. So I'm actually thinking throughout the chapter about how these dolls get to where they get. And this one was the first one that was coming up out of the ground. So I realized, the girl who left that doll somewhere might have been 25, 35 years ago. I mean, it's been buried ever since. So that chapter has a lot of creepy pictures. You may wonder about this gray catbird picture. Can anyone, it's not a random picture. It's actually what catbirds do at these super industrialized, awful sites. That's a catbird on the handle of a lawnmower that has been abandoned in front of a blue dumpster. And he's going into the dumpster, getting food, taking it right to his nest, which is right there. And they're just amazing birds. We had a pair that nested right outside of a car wash, and they spent all day just eating the bugs that got washed off the car wash inside the car wash. Well, it's an indoor car wash, but then they would just fly out to their nest, which is sort of at the back of the parking lot, and go in to get bugs. They're really amazing birds. I have incredible respect for them. And if you've never seen their eggs, they're so blue that they make robin's eggs look, like nothing. I should have brought a picture. I have a lot of pictures of their eggs. All right, any questions about the catbirds or the dolls? Yes.
Superfund being dope.
No, Superfund it could be, but it would take Congress to get rid of it, which we said about a lot of other things too. But Superfund is a big fund that used to be from taxes on oil companies, cement makers, and some of the biggest polluters. Congress stopped taxing them back during one of the Bush administrations, I think, and then started just putting in general tax money into the Superfund. So there's a lot of money in the Superfund, but to get money and that money all comes from fines as well, previous fines, but it's replenished because Department of Justice lawyers are going after the polluters. If that stops, then eventually Superfund will be depleted. But it would take an act of Congress to undo this law from 1981 to legally stop Superfund. Yes.
You're out counting catbirds. You count the birds or the nests or both, or?
That's a good question. The question is, when I'm out counting catbirds, what do we do? We actually count all the birds present, all different kinds of birds. We can't study intensively the contamination levels in birds that aren't very common because we won't find enough nests, or birds that nest on the tops of trees. So we focus on barn swallows and catbirds, and we originally sampled about 10 species of birds, and these were the two to look at because they're exposed the most. So what we do is we survey all the birds using standard methods. So you're listening for singing males early in the morning, and usually I use younger people who can hear really well because these are noisy areas, and I do it too. But we listen for 8 minutes or some variation of that at one point, and you have to measure how far away each singing bird is, and make sure you only count it one time. So you have to sort of keep track of it as it moves around. Then you can calculate something that wasn't possible until we had sophisticated computer software, but you can calculate, because you know the distance to every bird, you can calculate the dispersion across the area of those birds that you just counted. And if a lot of them are close to you and not too many are far away, then that means that species isn't very detectable. It's not very loud because you're only hearing the ones that are near you. But if a lot of them are far away and some of them are close, that means you're hearing most of them. Okay, because you're getting them over, they should be randomly distributed across the whole circle around you. So what you can do then for each species is to actually get the density based on that. And if all the birds are clustered around you, like you'd find with the blue-gray gnatcatchers, which aren't very loud, then it sort of adds gnatcatchers out in the rest of the area. But if you're hearing birds far away and close, like you would with crows, then it's pretty much the number that you counted. So you can get the density of every species, and then you can do that all the way up and down the shoreline, and then you can estimate how many there are and how many are exposed to the chemicals. And you know how many eggs they have, and you know from the level of chemicals how many eggs aren't going to hatch. So then you can say exactly how many of each species didn't hatch, but only if you sample the eggs. So you can't do it for either the peregrine falcons, because there's only 2 of them on the whole river, and you can't do it for the and also they rip your heads open if you try to climb the bridge under I-95 to get the eggs. And you also can't do it for birds that nest up in trees. If you can't get their eggs, you can't tell how much is in them. But what the lawsuits for Superfund do is they just focus on 1 or 2 species, because if you can return the catbirds to somebody by creating new habitat for catbirds, by cleaning up an area and planting lots of trees, you're also returning all the other birds that would nest there too. So the idea is if you get the catbirds and the barn swallows replaced, you're probably replacing everything, including the mammals and the turtles and everything else too. Yes.
Could Merlin use AI to do what your students are doing to get the right distance and numbers?
The question is, could Merlin replace my students in counting the birds? Yes.
Say that.
And my whole profession. No, they couldn't, because Merlin cannot tell the distance to the birds at this point, and it probably won't ever be able to, because you need an array of microphones all over the area. And what you really have to do is to go up and down and do hundreds of counts up and down the river. So you couldn't set up an array of microphones to estimate the distance. Without the distance, all Merlin can tell you is presence or absence, which is valuable information, but it's not what you need here, because it doesn't tell you how many birds are affected. But I wouldn't doubt that in 5 or 10 years, we could do that. Yes.
Who brings these lawsuits up? I mean, who's behind it?
The question is, who brings the lawsuits? The Superfund law, which has a much longer name, that's just a nickname for it, passed in 1981, requires the government to do it, to maintain a list of all of the polluted sites, and then to go after the top ones. And the process takes 20 or 30 years for each site to be settled. So, they're still working on these settlements. Now, they could just, if the company feels like they just want to settle without a lawsuit, they might do it quicker, which is what DuPont did on the Shenandoah River. There was no lawsuit. They got a really good deal. 50 million is nothing compared to the billions that they made polluting that river. So they just thought, well, let's just do the right thing and just come to an agreement. But they required 6 years of our research to show them how bad it was before they did that. And you know who owns the manufacturer of Agent Orange? That company was sold to another company, which was sold to another company, which was sold to the Argentinian government. So how are we ever going to collect from them or bring them to court or anything? But they're proceeding because it's a big case. Yes.
many different kinds of pollutants are in this particular area?
That's a great question. How many kinds of pollutants are in the area? So we tested for mercury and PCBs. There's 144 varieties of PCBs, so we had to test for all of them. And then dioxins, which are in a family of chemicals, of which there's several varieties, and furans, which is another one. They're all in there, but we just determined that most, only a few of them are really high levels and dangerous to birds. Some of those aren't really poisonous, actually. So, yeah, so the question, so what we are interested in is what the whole mix does to the birds. Yeah, I just say dioxin because that's the worst one, but the way you do it is every chemical is tested in the lab to see how bad it is compared to pure dioxin. And then if it's like half as bad, then that chemical gets times half. And so if there's twice as much as there is dioxin times half, then it's about this, it's equally bad. But you have to do that for all 144 forms of PCB.
And how is the effect on people? I mean, I know we probably talked about other levels.
The effect of PCBs and dioxin on people is really bad. It's carcinogenic. It causes liver cancer, and primarily, it's also will kill you if you get too much just all at once. But that's not usually the case.
So it's helping if you bring it back backwards. But how about people?
Yes. So Superfund law also applies to people primarily. Birds are just a sort of side thing, but the EPA is responsible for cleaning up the sites and bringing them to levels that are healthy for people to eat the fish and swim in the river. And so they're not concerned with wildlife. And the United States Fish and Wildlife Service, which is who I work with, they're not concerned with people directly. They're concerned with wildlife. So there's a whole different set of lawsuits by the EPA that would be parallel to this, and they have also been going on for 50 years or something. Yeah, good question. All right, I have only one more chapter to read. It's very short, and it's the very end of the book. And well, I have chosen to read the kind of lighthearted chapters. The book is not all lighthearted at all. Okay, it's serious. It has a lot of serious stuff in it. And my father died 4 years ago, and he's a major character in the book. So at the end of the book, he dies. So that's what this is. So it's gonna be a little sad. Our birding journey had come to an end. Even the vicarious part in the latter years, where I would tell him about what I had seen on my ornithology class trip that day, and he got just as excited as if he had seen it with us. So he's sick in Philadelphia. I had pre-grieved for several years, knowing that diagnosis of advanced cirrhosis in your late 80s was a death sentence. So I was able to deal with the aftermath of his death without much emotional turmoil. So the previous part of the chapter, it's clear. I've already had his eulogy in here, which some of you might have read in the newspaper, and so he's passed already. I had pre-grieved for several years, knowing that diagnosis of advanced cirrhosis. So I was able to deal with the aftermath of his death without much emotional turmoil. I tried to talk to his spirit as instructed by a person well-versed in grief, but that felt forced and I couldn't keep it up. I reached inside to see what inner feelings about him I was repressing or ignoring, but there were none to be found. I went on a birding trip with my sister to see the newly recognized Cassia crossbill species in Idaho as a memorial tribute, because that would have been the next trip we took with him. But we just had a great time and didn't talk about him much. Then one afternoon in the spring, I was doing research in a swamp in Virginia. It's actually at Ford's Colony. With a couple of students. It was an isolated wetland created by beavers and surrounded by golf courses. There was a giant colony of great blue herons nesting in a sweet gum tree in the middle. The water was deep and very cold. All of our chest waders were leaking, as often happens after they've been hanging up in the garage all winter. So I sent the students back to shallower water at the edge of the swamp and pushed on alone. Up ahead, I heard a bird singing a loud song of 7 repeated, insistent, clear notes. It took a second, but I realized that it was the first prothonotary warbler of the spring. These are the most brilliantly yellow-orange colored of the many brilliantly yellow-orange warblers. I got a distant but perfect look through my binoculars, and I made a mental note to call my dad when I got home to tell him that spring was here. Then I realized that there would be no call, and his death finally hit me, and I cried alone in the swamp. That's the end of that chapter. So the book, I guess, probably helped me, deal with the death of my father, although it was a couple of years later. But I recalled my entire life to write the book and looked up things and to figure out when things and did they really happen. I talked to my siblings and other people and read newspaper articles to corroborate things that I thought had happened. All these rare bird reports. Every bird I've ever seen that was rare, you can find it, online somewhere, someone reporting it. So I think that the fact that I'm sort of nearing retirement-ish, and my father died, and my kids moved away. They're finally like both on the West Coast and not around. That was writing this what turned out to be a memoir that was supposed to be sort of a fun textbook on birds. Was a very, cathartic process. And even if I don't get it published, I'll be very pleased that I wrote it because it was just such a great experience. And I recommend everybody try to write a book about their life that they don't expect anyone to read. I mean, it's a great experience. And you have to really think why you did everything you did. And then when you show it to people and have a retreat and they ask you why you were such an asshole in graduate school, you really have to deal with a lot of things. So anyway, I do actually really recommend writing a book just for yourself. And I hope this gets published but it really doesn't matter to me at all. It's just that I'm in a field where you just try to publish everything. So, I want to do that. And it would just be really fun to, meet people who'd read the book and talk to them about it. Just like I meet people who read my newspaper article when I'm out at Jamestown Island, and it's just fun to talk about it, and it just connects you with your community. So I'd love to do that with this book on a slightly larger scale, I guess. So that is all I was going to read to you. I'd be happy to answer any questions, and that's about 5 pages of a 400-page book. So there's still more. If you think you've read the whole book, you haven't. Yes.
Have a different picture than the doll.
Oh. I was late with all the pictures. This is my father's favorite bird, so I wanted that up while I was reading about him. And this is an amazing picture taken by one of my students this summer. She's an amazing photographer. All the pictures that accompany my newspaper article usually are her pictures because they look good even when they're only this big in a newspaper. Thank you for reminding me of that. Yeah, I mean, if you blow this thing up, you could see the eye filling the whole frame, and it's still in focus. It's just amazing. It was really close. That was up in New Jersey. Anybody have a question over here? I thought I saw one hand. Yes.
Yes, the genre of writing about birds is becoming very popular among writers. There's Jan.
Mhm. Yes. Christian Cooper
Yes.
and Amy Tan just wrote a book. Yeah. Oh, and another actress who bird watches in New York, Lily Taylor just wrote a book. Yeah, the question was, is writing books about birds getting really popular? Yes. I mean, books about birds have always been popular. There's actually 95 million bird watchers in the United States. So if you write a book about snails, it has to be really, really good. If you write a book about birds, even if like 1% of those people buy it, you still sell a bunch of them. So I don't think you can really make a lot of money writing a book like this, but you could at least get it published and have fun. So yes, there's a lot of people. So there's more people that watch birds than hunt and fish put together. And there's more people that watch birds. About the same number of people watch birds as watch the Super Bowl. Not quite as many, more people watch the Super Bowl, but a regular NFL game and bird watching is definitely on par. So there's a lot of people that are interested in birds, and a lot of them don't go very far from their house. They just look at their feeders, but they like to read about birds and look at pictures of birds. And there's also all the online communities about birds. And then the pandemic was fantastic for bird watching because it was the only thing a lot of people could do. So they started doing it. You could go outside, you could kind of be 6 feet away from people, and there's birds in your neighborhood, and it was quiet. So lots of new people. So that 95 million is actually from before the pandemic. I'll bet you it's a lot higher now. Judging from the bird club at William and Mary, the student bird club, they go out on Friday afternoon. So if you think college students, Friday afternoon, usually you don't think of bird watching, but they go out on Friday afternoon. It's the worst time for bird watching and for college students to be doing anything wholesome. But they go out, there's like 20 to 25 people on every walk that they take on Friday afternoon. But if you look at the list of people, it's different every single week. So they have 200 or 300 people that go over the course of the year that are members of the Bird Club of William and Mary, which has been around for a long time. So it's very popular with younger people. And the funny thing is I always come out, hey, do you want the binoculars? Half of them don't even want the binoculars. They're just out there for the social experience of bird watching. But if something really big, sitting really close, they might see it, but they're not that, that's not really the main point of it, because bird watching has got a large social component. Even if it's done online and you never meet the people, you know how many each of them has seen in your county, in your park, in your hotspot, and you kind of feel a community with them or a competition. But, yes.
Couple of comments from chat. One is sort of a question. Surprised you could find a blue-footed booby in the US. And then the other two are awesome presentations. Can't wait for the book. Great presentations. I hope to be able to read the book someday. Hope you find a publisher soon. You're a terrific storyteller, Dan. The depth of your scientific information adds even more interest to your book. You must get your book published. I'll buy one of the first copies. Yeah, that was Mary Haynes.
All right. Well, thank you for all those people who wrote that. And that's why I came here tonight, because I wanted someone to say all those things. I could have typed those from here. But, the one question there was blue-footed booby. Yes, blue-footed boobies are very rare in the United States. You can't see them in the East. But Salton Sea is just a hop, skip, and a jump from Baja, California. It's it's near the Mexican border out in the middle of the desert. It's a huge, I have a whole chapter on it. It's a huge ocean, inland ocean. And blue-footed boobies from Baja, which is where they normally nest, would just overshoot, would just see that from the sky out in Baja and just come over to it. It's probably 100 miles or something, but so that's the one place you could see them. They're not breeding there, but they would hang out there for a while. However, the Salton Sea, which is why I have a whole chapter on it, it's become so salty that everything in it has died, except for tiny little areas on the edges where fresh water comes in. So there's no longer blue-footed boobies there in the fall. And so they are quite hard to see in the US, which is why I'm so happy I saw them. And also, those bikers were happy that they saw them, although they might have gone to Mexico, I'm not sure. Yeah.
Narrating the audiobook.
I'll take that question seriously. The question was, will I narrate the audiobook? I love audiobooks where the author narrates them, so I would definitely do that if I'm so lucky as to publish and have a chance to do that. And I'll also act myself in the film. Any other questions? It's 8 o'clock. Yes.
Curious, you referenced to our question, the growing population of birders, and taking interest. I'm curious in your career as a younger person in the birding. Have you seen, is there a different approach today? We have eBird, we have people who are coming to it perhaps from seeing something online, eBird, that's to the students you had 20, 30 years ago. Do you feel like, is that shaped the community differently as somebody who's gotten into it in the past handful of years? Or is it about the same and everybody who hand rings about technology hasn't really changed?
It is dramatically different. So The question was, how has technology and the modernization of birding changed the sort of experience of the people that I'm encountering in it from when I was a kid to a college student to teaching college students and seeing 30 years of college students before and after eBird, before and after good binoculars were only $400 instead of $3,000 and that sort of thing. So there's been a tremendous amount of change. So birding was extremely elitist in the sense that, or cliquish, in the sense that when I was a kid, you couldn't find out about the birds unless it was so rare that it made the newspaper. There was no, or you were in this network of people who called each other, which as a 10-year-old, I wasn't in that network. My dad wasn't in that network. None, we weren't in the network. So you just hear about it much later. It was too late. So that's why I didn't see a Ross's gull, because I wasn't called. And I read about it in the New York Times and it was too late. So, but someone called Roger Troy Peterson because he didn't spend his whole life looking for one. And so he got to see it. But the bigger difference is, besides just the sort of the fact that everyone's on equal footing and can find out about everything instantly, is that it's extremely easy to get good at bird watching now. It was very hard when I was a kid. Okay, so to learn the songs, you had to listen to the record, which was one recording of the bird and the person saying what it was. There was no playing it outside to lure the bird in. There was no hearing like multiple different songs. You certainly couldn't just carry your phone around and listen to the bird and then listen to your phone. There was nothing like that. You had to memorize the song in your house from a record, which is poor quality. I mean, I know everyone loves vinyl, but this was poor quality recordings. So then you didn't see that many birds because you couldn't find out about them. And so you had to go out with bird clubs like ours. And that was how you learned where to go bird watching and what the different birds were. But now anybody can do all that on their own completely. And people have seen 750 birds in 1 year in North America now. Okay, that's a lifetime of birds. That's how many birds I've seen in my whole life. So over 50 years. I don't try very hard, but you can see that in 1 year now because there's so much information available and you can just find out where all the birds are and go there. It's expensive. But so lots of people who haven't been birding that long have seen lots of birds and have a level of information expertise that shocks me. A lot of my students know a lot more about bird watching than I do, about how to identify birds. However, they're not very good at it when you're actually out in the field because they haven't seen that many birds. They just go see the one and that's it. Then they go off and see another one. They have a big list, but they have missed something about actually learning, by discovering it themselves, tracking it down, hunting it down. So there's a difference. Like they're very sophisticated informationally, today's students, and tons of them are into birds. Whereas it used to be most of the people in my class were not interested in birds. They were just taking the class because they heard something about it. It was fun to go outside. But now most of them are bird watchers. And they come in with their Merlin and with their list and, but when I go out with them, they actually can't really identify the birds because they haven't had the experience yet. So it's just a big difference. And it's definitely not worse. I'm not complaining about it. I mean, it's amazing how many people are enjoying birds and are really, really knowledgeable about them to a level that I never will be. Like, I just don't care to learn how to tell the immature short and long-billed dowitcher apart by their feathers on their back. I do know the call difference, so I'm happy to, try to identify the two, but I don't know. If I'm doing a Christmas count, I'll try to figure it out, but that's about it. But you can do that. You can figure out where those birds are from. You can figure out how old they are, and which, by just photographing the back feathers and then looking at the photo. The other weird thing is that a lot of people just photograph the birds and don't ever look at them, and then they just look at the photos to identify it. That's a real thing, and it's not worse than looking at the bird and identifying it, but it's very different. You don't see behavior. That's really transforming things. It used to be occasionally someone would find a new bird in a picture that no one had seen while they were out, but now it's kind of a standard thing to just photograph everything, take a quick look, and then go to your screen. So that's a long answer to your question, but so it's nuanced. I don't actually talk about that in the book because as I said, I don't want to sound like a jerk in the book. And it's hard to talk about that without sounding a jerk. You're like, I did it the right way. Yeah. Great. Any other questions?
Well, Dan, you're gonna be a hard act to follow.
Yeah, they get well done.
One more comment.
Okay.
Yeah.
uh, On the chat.
Okay.
We have one other new member who is on Zoom, Steve Day.
CJ?
Steve Day.
Oh, okay, okay, great. Oop. Well, that was really brilliant. It's hilarious, it's touching, it's full of information, and I can't wait. And I agree with Sue. I hope you read it. I love books on tape, and I love it when the authors read it. And no one else could read your book. So hopefully that'll happen at some point. Yeah, that literally, that's a hard act to follow. That was really brilliant. Can't wait for it to come out. We do have a couple of brief announcements we'll make. First up, maybe George, you want to speak to the field trip coming up on Saturday? You took my breath away. I don't even know. That was just wonderful.
Okay, folks, Saturday, field trip to the Eastern Shore coming up. We're going to be meeting at 8:30 at the Eastern Shore, Virginia National Wildlife Refuge Visitor Center. And Deborah Humphreys will be leading us. Thanks, Deborah. And that will be the first stop at the Wildlife Refuge. We're going to go to Kipta Peak. We're going to go to the Edward Brinkley Nature Preserve. The order we do that is going to be up to Deborah, depending upon what the interesting birds look like and all that. But we'll make that decision when we get to when we're finished with the Wildlife Refuge. If there's anybody that wants to carpool, let me know. There are a couple people that have expressed interest in rides, and I've sorted that out. But again, 8:30 at the Visitor Center for the Eastern Shore Virginia National Wildlife Center. And after we're done with the 3 sites we have, we'll meet for lunch at the Cape Charles Brewing Company before we head back here. Probably get back here, think about in the 3:30 to 4:30 timeframe, depending on how many birds we see. One other thing I'll say, mark your calendars for November 15th. That will be our next field trip, and we're going to Grandview Nature Preserve in Hampton. Nancy will be leading us there. You'll see more information about that in the next issue of the newsletter and my emails that'll come out 2 weeks and 1 week ahead of time. Anyways, weather looks good for Saturday. Hope the birding is good.
Thank you, George. I might mention that with the shutdown, do not anticipate the restrooms at the refuge to be open. So if you'd like to stop at the Welcome Center just before you get to the refuge, that would probably be a good plan. There are some as we go from there, but if you want an initial stop at the Welcome Center. Scott Hemler, do you want to say something about our next bird walk, please?
Hi, yes. Our next bird walk is going to be on Saturday, October 25th. So Saturday, a week from now, at 8 a.m. at New Quarter Park. We'll meet at the usual spot at the parking lot there by the park office. And it usually takes about 2 hours. We'll go down to the dock and then up back to the fire pit and that kind of thing. And a lot of our winter residents, like yellow rump warblers and yellow-bellied sapsuckers and the like, are starting to arrive. So hopefully we'll be seeing a lot of new winter residents coming in, as well as our, maybe some late migrants moving through. So yeah, this Saturday, next Saturday, not this one, next Saturday, October 25th at 8 a.m. at New Quarter Park. And let's hope we have good weather that day.
Great. Thank you, Scott. Those are always fun. Hope everybody can make it to that. I would like to announce for Mary Ellen that the deadline for the November newsletter is October 26th. This will be the last one of the year, so if you have anything that you would like to have promoted for December, it should go into the November newsletter. And as always, Mary Ellen welcomes your photos, sightings, essays, book reviews, anything you have. In November newsletter will be the slate of proposed officers for the proposed board for 2026. We will vote on it in the November meeting. There is still time to raise your hand if you'd like to be on the board. We are looking for a vice president newsletter. That is the big position we're still trying to fill. That's so if anybody's interested in that, please contact me. Let's see. Shirley, you want to say a few words about Christmas bird count?
Indeed, it will be just a few words. It's hard to follow and to stand up here.
Speechless.
How about that?
It's got turned off.
Oh, the microphone's going off?
We need to switch. If it,
Battery might have gone out too.
we burned through 2 microphones. The battery is gone.
All right, well,
Okay, you might get a few breaths out of it.
okay. Okay, it's intermittent. So what I do want to say is that our Christmas bird count is coming up Sunday, December 14th, about 2 months from now. So this will be our 49th Christmas bird count. And I think Dan has been on probably 35 of them. So you'll hear more from me in the November newsletter, and plus be sending out some emails about asking you to participate either as a field person or as a feeder watcher, or some people are, super achievers and they do both. So we do have some of those folks too. So save the date, December 14th. I was looking at the calendar, I realized December 14th is not even in the winter. It's still fall. So winter doesn't come till a week later. So if you remember last year, it was cold as the dickens. It was so cold last year. So maybe December 14th this year, maybe like today, that would be great. So save that date, December 14th, and plan to participate, and you'll hear more from me about that in the coming weeks.
Thank you, Shirley. Patty, you want to just mention our November meeting? And I think everybody knows that we do not have a December meeting. So we'll have November and then on to January.
So our November meeting is November 19th. James Abbott will be with us talking about birding in New Zealand. He's with the James River Association. And we do have January 21st planned too. So that'll be a joint meeting with us in the Historic Rivers chapter. Bobby Klontz is going to be talking about land management for the red cockaded woodpecker. So that'll be a good one too. So we'll have a big group here again. I'll have to make sure there's enough chairs. Or maybe Rexanne will. All right, that's it.
Okay, great. Thank you, Patty. That's pretty much what I have. I will give you a update on Hawkwatch. We're going to be there Saturday. They are, as of this afternoon, about 26,000. It's given up. 26,000. Sorry, 26,500 birds as of this afternoon. I can't help myself. I am going tomorrow because at Cape May, at about 4 o'clock this afternoon, they had a rough-legged hawk. So we have found that 24 hours later, when we get lucky, they come over Kip to Peak. It's worked for Swainson's warbler, It worked for forktail flycatcher. No,
Swallowtail,
swallowtail,
Swainson's.
Swainson's, yeah, anyway, it's worked enough that, I'm gonna fall for it one more time. And also they had a Connecticut warbler, my nemesis bird, so I'm gonna. But, hopefully Saturday we'll have a good day. I know the winds are gonna be a little bit different, but Kipta Peak is always a fun place to walk around. All those locations, Brinkley, fun place to walk around. We'll have a great time on the Eastern Shore. Anybody else? Yes, Rick.
What's going on tomorrow?
It's funny that you ask. I am leading a bird walk tomorrow, Bassett Trace, at 8 o'clock. It is, I thought it for CW, but I guess open to the public.
Free.
It's free and open to the public. And, so 8 o'clock at, Bassett Trace. Yeah, that's before I go to the Hawk Watch. I told them I can't be there right away. So yeah, 8 o'clock tomorrow morning, Bassett Trace. I think everybody knows where Bassett Trace is, probably pretty much.
Which end do you meet at?
The gold, no, the hotel, the Griffin
Yeah.
Hotel, the kind of the trailhead there. Yeah, we don't go all that far. Kind of depends on who's there and how much they want to do, and but we'll see what we can find. Actually, today, all the birds were there in 50 feet of the parking lot. Blue-headed vireo, bunch of all kinds of things right there at the parking lot. So we may not go very far. Okie doke. Anybody else? Anything to add? Okay, well, anybody in Zoom land out there? Okay, now it's, again, as always, I apologize to the Zoom land folks that you cannot participate in our door prize drawing unless we can figure out a way to do that. That'll be on the agenda for 2026, how to get the Zoom people involved in the door prizes. Otherwise, Patty's gonna get your lucky tickets out. Patty's going to draw some winning numbers.
I don't know if everybody saw, we do have a.
Oh my gosh, we got Squirrel Buster feeder, we got puzzles, we got books.